Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar organized jointly by Ankara-based Center for Eurasian Studies, AVİM, and Tbilisi-based Geocase. My name is Turgut Kerem Tuncel, and I'm an analyst at AVİM in Ankara, and I will be moderating this webinar. The title of the webinar is The Search for Regional Stability and Cooperation in the South Caucasus in the Aftermath of the 2020 Karabakh War, Views from Georgia and Turkey. As the title reveals, we will be discussing the South Caucasus after the 2020 Karabakh War. Our focus will be on the prospects of regional stability and cooperation. We will speak about the possible challenges to those prospects as well. And to talk about the opportunities and challenges, we will also discuss the developments in the region and the emerging context in the South Caucasus.
Ben şu kapıyı kapatsana.
Please mute yourself, everybody. Thank you. From the Georgian and Turkish perspectives, I think this is very important. I should underline this. In other words, instead of a general discussion, our interest will be on Georgia and Turkey and their perceptions and possible actions. I firmly believe that it is the scholars, researchers, intellectuals from the South Caucasus who should be speaking first about the South Caucasus. We should learn about our region from the experts and intellectuals from the region and not from the papers and reports produced in faraway places. And I think our region and our regional experts should have their voice heard. For this reason, I value a lot today's webinar, which brings Turkish and Georgian scholars together to discuss regional issues. As you also in the announcement and the flyer of this webinar, we were honored by Ambassador of Turkey to Georgia, Her Excellency Fatma Ceren Yazgan, and Ambassador of Georgia to Turkey, His Excellency Georgi Jangawas' kindness not to turn our invitation down to make opening remarks. I'd like to thank both ambassadors. However, this morning I received a call from the Georgian embassy in Ankara, and I was informed that Mr. Jangawa will not be able to be with us today because of an urgent emergency situation related to a health issue of a family member. I hope things will be fine very soon. So we will not have Mr. Ambassador with us today. So we have a lot to discuss and little time. For this reason, I will stop my introduction here and give the floor for the opening remarks. I first like to give the floor to Ambassador Yazgan. Ambassador Yazgan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very, very much, Kerem Bey. It's a pleasure and honor to speak today. First of all, AVİM has been a very valuable platform to discuss Eurasian affairs from the Turkish perspective, but also in informing the Turkish public about the necessity of real experts in the field and doing field work. We have been following AVİM's work, not only because very esteemed ambassadors of Turkey who are now in retirement, Ambassador Alev Kılıç is now present here, and of course there had been others. Ambassador Lutem had been a very valuable bridge between the diplomacy, the think tank, the research and policy making in the past. So therefore, I'd like to particularly underline my greatest respect for the work that had been done in AVİM. Geocase, who is now represented by the founder, and I must say a highly valuable intellectual contributor to the Georgian discussions about foreign policy, Mr. Viktor Kiani, is also has appeared in Georgia during my tenure here as a important platform which discusses not from a very narrow perspective, but from a very global perspective of the Caucasus, Georgia, and beyond. So I'd like to also thank Mr. Kiani for his past, present, and future cooperation. Yes, after the 2020 war in Nagorno-Karabakh, the region, our region, where Georgia and Turkey have been both important players, have to face a period of change. This change is not going to be prevented. It will happen. The question which we should be discussing is about how to manage this change. The status quo will not be maintained. It's not only about the South Caucasus or the Caucasus per se. It's about the north of the Caucasus, the Black Sea region, and what's happening now in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. And of course, for Turkey, the question is not about only the Black Sea or the Caucasus, but we have a 360 degrees of a view of our foreign policy, because practically speaking, the global actors, which are players in this dynamics, are also players in the south of Turkey and in the west of Turkey. First and foremost, let me underline, when Turkey or the Turkish foreign policy advisors, decision makers, practitioners in the field evaluate, assess the situation, they do not have the luxury to concentrate on a single dynamic in a single region. We have to assess the intentions, the actions, expectations, perceived real threats that concerns our national security and the security of our allies and partners in that 360 degrees of thinking. And how to manage the change with that framework is the question for me as the ambassador here to evaluate. Our bilateral relations with Georgia, which is defined as strategic partnership, had been developing very fast and very organically, and sometimes even the governments stayed behind of the other dynamics, the actors. It was sometimes non-state actors as businesses, business interests, sometimes trade interests, and sometimes geopolitical developments which grew beyond the Turkish government policies. There are other actors being involved. And but in that framework, the Georgian-Turkish relations have always went forward. That is, I think, as good as it gets in any international relations framework. Our trade flourished. We have visa-free regime, which is provides free mobility for our people. Our understanding of each other's sensitivities, priorities have developed. And you see that when working as a Turkish diplomat in Georgia, you're welcomed in your neighbor's house. And the issues between Turkey and Georgia, positive, challenges, whatever, we have channels to discuss these issues at many levels, high political levels, bureaucratic levels, from border administrations, So there's a lot of people talking to each other. Again, that's very good, but again, that's something to be managed, so that we try to be as democratic, as inclusive of interests of all actors involved in this relationship, but also we have to streamline overall interests and our future together. There have been the regional actions together, which are like the project for connectivity and energy transport, which had been strategically important. Bakü-Tiflis-Ceyhan is a revolutionary project, which was followed by TAP-TANAP projects, and of course the BTK. So in terms of transport of energy resources and connectivity, which is what we call the middle corridor between the Asia and Europe, two grandiose markets which have enormous importance for both countries. We have worked together and with our partner, brother, neighbor, Azerbaijan. So it's not a coincidence that our bilateral relations with Georgia had also moved on to have that trilateral axis of cooperation, which serves to the interests of these three countries and enhancing the bilateral relations as well. And again, Turkey has been the only NATO country which bordered in this region the Soviet Union, and the only NATO country which is littoral to the Black Sea, an essential actor in Euro-Atlantic security, and of course the Black Sea. In the past, when we look, the Turkey's policy in this region had always been based on regional ownership, regional cooperation, inclusivity, participation of multiple actors from the region and out of the region. And Turkey had been a bridge between Georgia and the West, per se. And the Turkish economy flourishing since 90s, its infrastructure developing also helped the Georgian economy and connectivity to the West. And in return, Georgia provided this very important point of access for Turkey to reach to the East. So there is interdependence, complementary roles, mutually defined and acceptable framework of definition of interests in relation to people-to-people contacts. On that background, when we see what's happening after the war, there is a search for stability, search for peace through developing more inclusivity, more joint platforms, again on the basis of trade and commercial interests, prosperity, and building a region which comprises of actors who are willing to go forward together. Because the so-called frozen conflicts, which were the heritage of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which the status quo of that framework is not able to keep anymore. There's not going to be this definition of frozen conflicts. After the Nagorno-Karabakh, we have seen the war, that these conflicts will not be able to stay frozen. for this or that reason. And we need to reach to solutions where internationally, under the international law, and maybe even the real politics of life, we need to come to terms with this balance of power in the region, where all actors will be able to concentrate on developing their comparative advantages, to be able to protect their individual and collective interests vis-a-vis the competition that we see coming from different regions, and also that this idea that if we're able to talk to each other directly, and if we're able to raise the level of confidence between our countries in a way to solve demarcation issues, in a way to solve trade issues, free trade arrangements, which helps other parts of the world. And I think here we can give European Union as an example, particularly the early phase after the Second World War. Then we will be able to look into the future with more confidence, all of us. Turkey is in the middle of a region where it had been defined as conflicts or frozen conflicts. For the past 30 years that I have entered foreign ministry, I don't know any time which there was no war, no conflict. That was a peaceful era around us. So I come from a generation of diplomacy where we always had to manage crisis. And now we have to manage peace in the Caucasus. We have seen that in the Balkans, in terms of Bosnia and in Kosovo, about how to reach peace. But obviously, what we are seeing today there gives us some lessons to think about. What to do, what not to do. So we cannot pretend to have solved the issues when we don't solve the issues in this region. We really need to pay attention to the crux of the problems. And for that, of course, based on the principles like territorial integrity of our neighbor, Georgia, is something we defend, and sovereignty, which means exercising the right of economic and political decisions, administrative decisions in all of that territory, and for the security of that territory. And this has been our policy for all related Azerbaijan, and during the Nagorno-Karabakh, you have heard all of us from Turkey that we've been saying we have been very staunch in our principles, defending our principles, that territorial integrity and sovereignty of the countries, of our friends and allies we stand with, we defend. And also in Ukraine, you have seen us. But also we keep saying that this dialogue platforms, the channels, should be open in the region to reach our goals. Because unmanaged conflicts that are tried to keep on the cost of the people's region and the future is not sustainable anymore. So we have to manage that, but also we have to make every actor in this region and out of this region understand that if we start bargaining a new Yalta axioms, spheres of influences, or the right of the powerful instead of what is sustainable, common sense, we will all lose. So this is the understanding that we see how our cooperation with Georgia in the Caucasus and in the Black Sea region, which we define as our common region, in our relations with the actors, other actors in the region and out of the region. This is the framework. And I believe that's a realistic one. And we believe that Georgia has the capacity to use its God-given beautiful land as an important hub in the region for many things. Because it is multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-confessional, historically had been connected with all actors in the region, has opened new chapters in its history for connecting to Europe, the West, Euro-Atlantic community, but as well as through its past historical ties, has a good connection with the Asian, and I must say also even in African countries. So Georgia, like Turkey, in fact, like Ukraine, is in this zone. I define it as a belt, but not a belt from east to west, but from north to east, which always has to balance this Western, Eastern, whatever they mean, centers of gravity. But of course, the interests of Georgia will have to be defined by the Georgian people and the powers in Georgia, which of course in the path of democratic, plural democratic, sovereign country. And it's very important for Turkey to see Georgia continuing in that path, because that pluralistic approach will give Georgia, in my humble opinion, that to fulfill that role of being a hub in this part of the South Caucasus, and I have to say Eastern Black Sea. So, let me underline, Turkey has been since 1921. It's Atatürk's policy, by the way. This is a Republican, pre-Republican policy, which followed because we have a lot of Turkish citizens of Georgian origin. We have a lot of citizens of the Caucasus mosaic, whichever, from Dagestan to Chechnya. These are our heritage, Abkhazians, Cherkess. And we're part of the Caucasus, not only by our Eastern geography, but also this population. And we will always be part of this geography. You cannot discuss South Caucasus without Turkey. It's not because of all these projects, connectivity, economy, but it's because we're part of it by population, by history, by culture, by understanding the dynamics and the tradition of diplomacy. So we will continue that pre-Republican and Republican policy of supporting free, sovereign, democratic, and a good neighbor, secure Georgia on our border, as we have, I think, demonstrated amply in the past 30 years, that we are happy to help in any way we can, and hopefully find out ways and means which will be mutually beneficial on win-win solutions with Georgia that will be extended to other allies and friends in the region, and also try to use the Georgian historical wisdom of making their enemies friends at the table. So this is an old Georgian tradition, which I love. That's what Supra is about. And I think Georgia has a tradition of a very good diplomacy from the history, not only in this 30 years, but in this 30 years too. And that tradition is very compatible with the Turkish tradition. So that will be my rather long opening comments. I'll be very happy to answer any questions after the discussions, and thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yazgan. This was a very enlightening remark. So now for the second opening remark, I would like to give the floor to Geocase Chair, Mr. Viktor Kiani, who is also one of the speakers of today's webinar. Mr. Kiani, floor is yours.
So much indeed. Let me please welcome the audience and distinguished panelists. Let me welcome Your Excellency, who is really the ambassador not just by the letter of the law, but by the spirit. So it's always a great opportunity to communicate and to interact with you, Your Excellency. So thank you so much for the great job you're doing on behalf of the partnership and friendship of our two nations. And great to have you here. Let me express my profound thanks to the Center for Eurasian Studies for your enormous efforts and contribution to make this webinar happen. Your Excellency has pointed out, and quite rightly pointed out, so very tight political connections, cooperation in economy, trade, defense, security. But most importantly, and hopefully you would agree with me, my distinguished colleagues, that those ties are extremely important when we speak about community to community. And this webinar is exactly about the expression of that very important tie, about the soft power interacting between two nations. And especially when it comes down to the very complex and very dynamic region, which is the South Caucasus. And we often hear these days that many pundits and many politicians, they make comparisons between what's happening in the South Caucasus and what's happening in the broader context of the emerging New World Order. And probably a minor part of the pundits could think that this is a wrong comparison, but I think that this is a right comparison, because there are many pros and cons which could be discussed in that context. And I fully share that when we speak about one of the very important feature of the emerging New World Order, which I called in one of my articles, hub and spoke regional order. The South Caucasus really is becoming, in front of our eyes, a very important center for gravitation. And therefore, you know, these discussions, having a say by Turkish colleagues on the regional matters and having a say by Georgian colleagues, this is very important to helping our stakeholders navigating in and charting the right course in terms of bringing our nations even more closer. I should also say that the South Caucasus, we often say that peace and stability, but it's much easier to say than to do. And what is also important that when we speak about order and stability in the South Caucasus, it's not just about South Caucasus as such, but I think that the Caucasian diversity and South Caucasus have a more important meaning, because it's about creating an overall system in the big picture of Eurasian security and Eurasian security landscape. So this is an added value about discussing the matters in the region of the South Caucasus. I should necessarily point out that that being said, our regional exposure on the map, especially speaking about Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, on the map of the global interest, they become explicitly articulated, and they definitely activate various regional actors in terms of clashing their regional interests in the regional context. And what is for the objectivity of my remarks, I should say that the regional challenges to some extent are the direct cause not of exogenous factors only, but are a result of a painful transformation of political systems and political institutions, be it in Georgia, Armenia, or Azerbaijan. I'm very thankful to Her Excellency when she made a very precise point by qualifying the ethnic conflicts as the so-called ethnic conflicts. And this is very important because I have to emphasize that one of the key purposes of the similar discussions is about finding right answers onto various regional arrangements and disorders. Hence, when we often hear these days about the so-called ethnic conflicts in Georgia, there should be no mistake, and we should correct the speak immediately that the so-called Georgian ethnic conflicts, such as Georgian Abkhazian and Georgian Ossetian, are direct and unequivocal result of the national policy trajectory, as those very conflicts bear all the hallmarks of geopolitics and are, in a way, a destructive response to Georgia's foreign choice. So close this, my opening remarks, thinks we have others to join us. These discussions probably would be very tiny, but still a solid step on a way of portraying the region from the one synonymous with war, conflict, and instability into the region synonymous with peace, mutual understanding, and development instead. And therefore, again, to thank all the organizers, to thank the distinguished audience, to thank all the panelists, and I think that these discussions are really not a waste of time. They're conducting at the right moments, in terms of very unfortunate circumstances surrounding the Greater Black Sea region, and having an objective, well-seasoned, and qualified say is exactly our moral duty, not to mention professional obligation. So thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiani. And for the last opening remark, I welcome retired Ambassador Alev Kılıç, the Director of Center for Eurasian Studies. Mr. Kılıç, floor is yours.
Thank you, Turgut. Ambassador Fatma Ceren Yazgan, Geocase Chairman, Mr. Viktor Kiani, esteemed speakers, distinguished guests. I would like to start first by thanking Her Excellency Fatma Ceren Yazgan for her presence here and very insightful, comprehensive remarks on the region, reflecting her presence in Tbilisi over 4 years now, I think, and also years of experience before that. So we listened with great attention and estimation of what she has passed on to us. And I would also like to thank on this occasion her kind words on AVİM. We dearly miss, of course, the presence of Ambassador Georgi Zhangava. On the other hand, he should feel comfortable, I feel, that both Ambassador Yazgan and Mr. Kiani has expressed or filled his shoes on the what should be said on Georgia, Turkish-Georgian relations. So, but I hope we will have another opportunity to have him with us and hear this from his own words. Turks and Georgians are two peoples that have centuries-long relations. We are two nations connected by geography and history. In the last 30 years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Turkey and Georgia have established good neighborly bilateral relations. An important development was the establishment of the high-level Strategic Cooperation Council between the two countries in the year 2016. It would be fair to say that relations between Turkey and Georgia can be regarded as an example for a highly successful and visionary foreign policies of two neighboring countries. With the adoption of the Trabzon Declaration in 2012 by Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, a trilateral format was established between these three neighboring countries. This opened the way for Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan oil pipeline, the Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum gas pipeline, and the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. These projects have strategic significance, not only regionally, but also in a global scale. As such, Turkey-Georgia-Azerbaijan relations can also serve as a model for multilateral formats for the South Caucasus. Lately, in our region, and when I say our region, I also take into view the wider Black Sea region, where our countries are situated. We are faced with a number of threats and risks, but also opportunities. The recent escalation of the Russia-Ukraine crisis is a cause of concern, as mentioned by both distinguished speakers before me, for everyone in the region and beyond. On the brighter side, we see the rise of positive prospects in the South Caucasus in the aftermath of the 2020 Karabakh War. Despite the continuing situation in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the resolution of the Karabakh occupation creates optimism and provides the region with many opportunities. Upon this background today, experts from Turkey and Georgia will discuss the prospects of stability and cooperation in the South Caucasus. They will present Turkish and Georgian perspectives. This webinar is organized by AVİM and Geocase jointly. This tandem work of the two think tanks is significant for being an attempt to help the formation of a culture of cooperation among the think tanks of the region. I hope the teamwork of AVİM and Geocase will continue and also include other institutions from Turkey, Georgia, and also Azerbaijan and Armenia. Through building networks among the scholars in the region, we can have our voice heard in the global domain as a region. The foundation of the cooperation between AVİM and Geocase was, to a large extent, laid by the initiative of His Excellency Georgia H.E. He was the initiator of the two organizations to get in touch with each other. He also participated in the first inaugural meeting that we had a few months ago. Let me thank Ambassador Jangava, unfortunately in his absence, and express our deep appreciation. I would also like to express our thanks and also our deep appreciation to Her Excellency Fatma Ceren Yazgan, who has been serving as Turkish ambassador to Georgia since December 2017, for her kind participation and presentation in this event. My thanks also go to distinguished participants to this webinar, and I wish for a successful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kılıç. So after this opening remarks, this wonderful opening remarks, we will proceed with the expert discussion. And the expert discussion will be carried out in 3 rounds. I will ask 3 separate questions in each round, and all our 4 speakers will talk about those questions. Because of the time limitation, I ask our speakers to limit their answers within 5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes, more or less. I know it's hard, but at least please just try. And then because we have question and answer session, hopefully, and we already have 4 questions. And before starting, I would like to make a reminder to our audience. Please write your questions and short comments in the chat box to me, not to everyone, not to anyone else, but to me, because if you do that, I can see your questions. So please remember that. So use chat box and my name for your questions and comments. So I open the expert discussion session of this webinar. So we have 4 speakers, 4 distinguished speakers from Georgia and Turkey. Let me introduce them very briefly. So Viktor Kiani, he is the chair of the Geocase think tank in Tbilisi. He is a lawyer, a legal practitioner, and a senior partner and co-founder of the MKD law firm in Tbilisi, Georgia. Besides his profession in law, as you understood already, Mr. Kiani is a specialist in international relations, security studies, and governance. He regularly contributes to English and Georgian language media outlets, which I benefit a lot. Our second speaker is Dr. Emil Avdaliani, also from Geocase, and he's the director of Middle East Studies at Geocase. Dr. Avdaliani currently teaches history and international relations at Tbilisi State University and İля State University. His areas of specialization are modern political and military studies or issues in the South Caucasus and wider Eurasia, and he particularly focuses on Iran, Turkey, and China. He also works on Middle East politics. The third speaker is Dr. Yelda Karadağ, a very good and old friend of mine. Yelda, hello, welcome. Dr. Karadağ currently works as a program manager in International Republican Institute Turkey office. She holds a PhD in area studies, and her award-winning dissertation was on Europeanization in Georgia. She's one of the best experts on Georgia in Turkey. That's a reality. She has been involved in several national and international projects on Europeanization, democratization, political parties, and civil society in the post-Soviet region, and these are her areas of study, professional areas of study. And fourthly, the last but not least, our speaker is Tutku Dilaver, my dear colleague from AVİM. We worked together for many years. So she is an analyst at Center for Eurasian Studies. And she is specialized in South Caucasus and Turkish-Armenian relations in specific, and she does a great job on Turkish-Armenian studies relations. Tutku also focuses on European Union's Eastern Partnership initiation and EU policies regarding the South Caucasus. Besides publishing analysis and op-eds at our website, she contributes to Turkish and international media. And just as a note, she was currently on a work trip in South Caucasus, particularly to observe the region in the aftermath of the 2020 Karabakh War. So these are our four distinguished speakers. So I want to open up the first round of our expert discussion. And my question is that it will be on the ways in which, or on how you perceive the current state of South Caucasus. How do you assess the recent developments and situation in South Caucasus? Please give us a brief picture of the region from your point of view. So I think we can start with Mr. Kiani and then proceed with our other speakers. Mr. Kiani, could you please?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Tuncel, and mindful of time limitations. From my perspective, let me point out several key pillars of the changed regional landscape as a result of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. The key points, which hopefully is shared by many other scholars, that the Russian exclusivity in the region has ended. Because we're not saying that it has gone, it's still here to a large extent, but again, to emphasize exclusivity, and this is very important because it seems to us that Russia is not as strong as it was before the start of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War and its end results. This is one point which is important. So I fully agree with Your Excellency when she said that the status quo has changed, and this is very important to remember. The next point, which brings Turkey more strongly into the regional landscape and puts Russia and Turkish the duo in a new perspective, especially when taking into account historical legacy of those two nations interacting with each other. So it remains to be seen how Turkey and Russia would be, I would say, in this way, would be managing new regional stability in terms of new circumstances and in the new context. So this is very important and meaningful for us to see and observe. And what is important and what should be looked at in terms of different perception of the Eurasianism by Moscow and Ankara. This is also very important because up to my knowledge, Russia perceives Eurasianism as strictly from military and geopolitical standpoint, and Turkey has a different reading on the concept of Eurasianism. Also very important to know that, of course, the modern foreign relations, they very much depend on good relations among the leaders. And this is a very welcome note and very welcome sign. But it seems to me that what we're witnessing sort of, excessive conceptualization of personal ties between two leaders. And we wish for more sufficient synergy of institutional framework to be brought in. This is also important. So all in all, what we're witnessing, different optics of viewing the region. And those different optics especially relate to the Russian perception of the South Caucasus, viewing the South Caucasus as its own buffer zone. I would necessarily mention that that perception of buffer zone has somewhat been diminished because of stronger say by Turkey. From my standpoint, I would completely share with Your Excellency that trilateral axis of Baku, Tbilisi, Ankara has its own say, and we wish that it would increase in its power impacts. But it's also important to note, especially taking into account when we're speaking about the Russian buffer zone and Turkey being the NATO member, that by increasing the level of cooperation with Azerbaijan through Shusha Declaration, effectively what we're witnessing today, that's a formal NATO member, practically speaking, knocking at the Russian door in the zone which Russia has been treating and still is treating as its own exclusivity zone. So this would be very important development to observe. The next point, very quickly, is about Armenia. And I try to be very careful in my qualifications. Armenia's position in the aftermath of the Nagorno-Karabakh War. It remains to be seen what would be the real consequence of the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, would that have an impact on Armenian foreign policy? How Yerevan would be distanced, to put this in a way, from Moscow's orbit, and whether we could witness, some detachment from Russian orbits through Nagorno, through sort of, alleviating the Nagorno-Karabakh burden on Armenian foreign domestic policy. The next point is Iran, which obviously, from my standpoint, would continue its tepid positioning in the region, and that could be explained by the principal reason that Iran is cautious of a presence and possible increase of anti-Iranian posture in the region, and therefore I expect that it will continue its balancing in its regional posture by not making Moscow suspicious, or and mostly trying to intervene through regional platforms. The last point, which I should necessarily point out, that the biggest miracle, the biggest puzzle, I would say, not miracle, but the puzzle, is about the West in the region and the future prospects of the Western presence. So all in all, I think that, as I said in my opening remark, that the South Caucasus is something very interesting to observe, not in terms of academicians, but in terms of practicalities of doing policies. This is rather important region of the newly imagined Eurasian landscape, and its future shape would be determined by interaction of the West and non-West, let's put it this way. Probably new balancing points of respective influences. And what I would be expecting also is a certain increase in multi-vector, certain increase in foreign policy in terms of introducing more multi-vector approach. So this probably the very brief points, Dr. Tuncel, which I would like to mention. Some are arguable, some probably not. Hopefully, most of them none. But nevertheless, I'm bringing those points as a foot salt for the distinguished panelists and the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiani. Actually, your presentation was quite comprehensive, and it resulted in some questions from the audience. So it was good. So let's continue with Yelda. Then we can move to Dr. Avdeliani, then Dilaver. Yelda, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Tuncel, first of all, thank you for your kind words. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you for organizing such a wonderful meeting. So I think I need to begin with the overall assessment regarding the region. And as Madam Ambassador and Ambassador Kılıç and Mr. Kiani underlined, we see that there is a very important and crucial shift that we are experiencing in the region right now. And actually, to be honest, we are kind of we don't know what will the future will bring in terms of the creating new security vacuum in the region, whether the countries in the region would end up in a less secure environment with new security challenges. When I consider the whole environment, I would say that there's quite a pessimistic picture, quotes me, and we see that actually we experienced that last year, the current status quo changed after the Nagorno-Karabakh War last year. However, we are witnessing a new wave of change right now with the rising tension in the region regarding the position of the Russia addressing the kind of threat to Ukraine, basically. So, with having considering this intensifying security dynamics, I think Turkey needs to be very vigilant in order to encounter the future challenges that would come to fore in the region, and we also see that this tension between Russia and Ukraine would affect the whole region. I mean the whole Caucasus countries, including Georgia, first of all, due to the political, rather unfortunate, encounter with Russia, considering the dynamics in 2008. In my view, the real question is having considered the changing the dynamics and the intensifying tension in the region. In my view, the question is how to maintain the regional stability in the region in the long term, while being careful about the potential tension which would be expected to erupt in Ukraine. So I think this very problem would, open up a new episode of instability in the region for Turkey, for the Caucasus countries, the countries in the Caucasus, and for our region basically. So I know that I would draw a rather kind of pessimistic picture regarding the ongoing dynamics. However, I think again, before maybe discussing about the possibility of future cooperation and how to intensify and deepen the economic relations between the countries, the countries in the region, we need to also, unfortunately, again, we need to underline the security problems arose in the region that we are witnessing right now. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Elda. So you have been quite, you talk from the realistic paradigm. So yeah, thank you. And Dr. Avdaliani, how would you comment about this question?
Thank you very much for the event and for those kind words and speeches of the previous speakers. I would I'll try to be brief here because there are a lot of questions to cover here, but the major point I would like to make is that it's indeed a new order emerging in the South Caucasus. Well, I called it a hierarchical order, where Russia sort of tries to build a new vision for the region, where it presides over the security architecture in the region, and sort of tries to have other regional powers such as Turkey and Iran also playing a significant role, but not as big as Russia. And we've got Turkey, which opens up the regions essentially, because South Caucasus historically a relatively closed region on the periphery of Europe, and dominated by Russia for the nearly 2 centuries till the collapse of the Soviet Union. And now we have the very interesting process where South Caucasus is once again being closely linked to the wider Middle East region. And I think Turkey is instrumental in that sense in reconnecting this region, which is geographically more connected to the Middle East rather than to Russia because of the Caucasus Mountains. And I would call even Turkey as a disruptor of the status quo, which was in force for several centuries and managed by Russia. Now we have new infrastructure projects. Now we have basically new vision even of a region not dominated by one single power, but sort of with several regional powers playing along with each other for the influence in the region. And I think what we see, contrary to what many in the West think, is not that Russia is all powerful in the region, despite the fact that it essentially now stationed its forces in Nagorno-Karabakh following 2020 war there. But we see the tendency in Russia's foreign policy of increased reliance on military tools. Well, it has always been a very peculiar, or I would say, characteristic of Russian foreign policy. That's true, but what we see over the past several years is the increased reliance on those tools. And for me, it's not about power, but it's rather showing that you don't really have any other tools through which you will be managing or even dominating the region. So that's the lack of prestige here. That's the lack of long-term vision, where you could buy into the trust of the 3 South Caucasus states, and you have to basically rely and manage the small region through your essentially 4 military bases in the South Caucasus. And for this tiny region, that's quite a lot. And for me, it says more about insecurity on the Russian side there, rather than a real power. And I think, and I argued in very many articles on that issues, on that developments in the region, that Turkey is indeed instrumental in that sense. It might not appear on paper. For example, following the 2020 war in Nagorno-Karabakh, Turkey was absent as a signatory there. But you see that underneath, it's driven by Ankara's interest in the region. So those interests are more or less now acknowledged on an even higher level than it was before by Moscow. And I think the latest case of this opening of the region and increased Turkish influence in the region, of course, is the emerging rapprochement or seeming rapprochement between Armenia and Turkey. And whatever analysts, around the world might argue for, I still believe that in the longer run, those are the moves which will be maybe not sort of destroying or undermining essentially Russian influence right away, but they are sort of biting at the fundamentum of Russian power in the region. And the power of Russia for those decades and even centuries was that the closed region was solely reliant on Russian infrastructure and Russian military. Now we see the opposite, and I think that's what we have, the major development, the opening of the region, which started 30 years ago, but now sort of continues even more powerfully in the last several months or even years following the second Nagorno-Karabakh war. That's basically sort of major points which I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emil, Dr. Abdaliani. And Tutku, now it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Tuncay. Before I answer your question, if you let me, I would like.
Excuse me, is it my internet or Tutku? Your voice is not.
Welcome all of our guests here
her
and all
voice
of our
is great.
speakers. We are very happy to be with them, and I would like to thank Her Excellency Ms. Yazgan. So she actually pointed out and how
Do you hear me? There's a problem with the connection.
My voice is not clear.
Yeah. So maybe you can turn off your video.
Is it okay?
Yeah, because the voice
Can
is
you hear me?
very dirty. Yeah, Tutku. Again, let's try again.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Bad connection, I think, because of the weather conditions. So, yes. Where was I? I say that Her Excellency Ms. Yazgan covers every, every subject. I want to point it out briefly, and I would like to thank her for sharing us her insightful information and thoughts. So, as for your question, I want to draw a wider picture and about the recent developments, because I believe understanding the reasons and the developments behind the last recent events is important to evaluate realities in the ground. So I want to start from the maybe beginning, but very briefly. So I presume that our audience are all familiar with frozen conflicts, and Nagorno-Karabakh conflict had been considered as frozen conflict until 2020. That means the people thought there was nothing left to do but wait for what might happen next. However, make problems more. I visited Azerbaijan and attended some meetings there. One of the Azerbaijani speakers said something that caught my attention. He said many foreign experts he met with and representative told the Azerbaijanis to accept the situation and deal with it. So I believe this perspective was attached. So that's why all the proposals brought to the table within this perspective become meaningless, because giving up Karabakh and all 7 surrounding regions around it. So however, the 2020 Karabakh War changed the reality on the ground, and thus Azerbaijani's position on the table. So occupation in and around Karabakh is over now. Azerbaijan regained the control of most of the region, and it had not been able to take for almost 30 years with negotiation. And occupying forces supported by Armenia left the region. So all of these drives us and other levels. We entered another chapter. As other speaker mentioned, there is Russian peacekeepers in the field, yes. Now we have other issues to deal with, such as making a final peace agreement and making a permanent peaceful environment, as Her Excellency Ms. Yazgan expressed in her opening remark. So actually establishing sustainable peace concerns every country in the region very closely, but specifically it concerns Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, because the continuation of conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia triggered other skirmishes, not only in Nagorno-Karabakh, but also in other places. Just a few months before Karabakh War, in July 2020, some clashes broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan in a point from Karabakh near the Georgian border. And actually, these clashes triggered the 2020 Karabakh War because they showed how tensions in the region threatened the regional projects. I think it is the most important thing. The clashes took place in Tovuz are not mentioned when evaluating the, it was very important development because attacks directed here was posed a threat against economic investments of Georgia, Azerbaijan and Turkey. That's why maintaining the peace in the region is so important. However, establishing lasting peace is not something that can happen quickly. There is mutual distrust between countries, and it has potential to hinder positive developments.
Thank you, Tutku. So we finished the first round, and I think our speakers mentioned some common points. So I think in the region, the most significant actors are, one of the most significant actors is still Russia. We should follow closely the Russian policies. Turkey's influence is getting more and more important, and we should think about South Caucasus within the wider Black Sea region in the north and within the wider Middle East region in the south. And of course, Tutku mentioned the importance of regional politics and the importance of peace and stability for the continuation of this project. So these are what my take-ons from the first round. So actually, we are running out of the time. Therefore, I want to start the second round. So the second round. In the second round, after talking about the general picture of the South Caucasus, I would like our speakers to give us the Turkish and Georgian perspectives, specifically Turkish and Georgian perspectives as to possibilities and challenges in the region. We want to hear the Turkish views, Turkish view and the Georgian view. So let's start from the reverse order. Let's start from Tutku and end with Mr. Kiani. So what is the Turkish perspective on the possibilities and challenges in the region?
As I mentioned in the first round, keeping the peaceful environment in the region is the most important thing for Turkey, because South Caucasus region is vital for Turkey's access to Asia. As is known, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia have invested together in energy and transportation infrastructures for many years, as Ambassador said. So they want to become a part and perhaps a hub for China's Belt and Road Initiative. For instance, TANAP is one of those important projects, and the final stage of this project in UNOP, TAP, has been completed recently. So there are possibilities such as the transfer of gas from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan to Europe via TANAP. And there are some agreements on this subject. So we can say that Turkey has very valid and pragmatic reasons to want a peaceful environment in South Caucasus region. So after the 2020 Karabakh War, many opportunities occurred to achieve this goal, and establishing widespread transportation networks throughout the region is one of those opportunities. The road being opened between Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan via Zangezur or Suinik is also important for Turkey. In this way, a direct connection will be established between Azerbaijan and Nahchivan, and also Azerbaijan and Turkey. So in addition to the road to be opened through Zangezur, means that Armenia will also join the regional trade network and be able to send its goods to other markets. And it also means that imported goods can be reached Armenia more easily. So in this respect, it's beneficial for every country in the region. At this point, I would like to state that sometimes I heard that a lot, because I would like to state that the establishment of Zangezur corridor does not have potential to affect the future of existing project with between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. It should be emphasized that it would not a strategic or logical choice for Turkey and Azerbaijan to close all existing roads and use only the one passing through. For this reason, the project Turkey to progress with their own agendas. In this respect, I must say that I do not consider the possibility of Armenia being included in the regional transportation routes as a danger of Georgia. On the other hand, mutual distrust, I mentioned before, remains one of the most important challenges ahead. As can be seen, each country naturally approaches the issue through its own interests. And issues such as opening Zangezur corridor can be interpreted differently due to the mutual distrust. We have recently seen how bilateral distrust can turn into a larger tensions in the developments between Azerbaijan and Iran. So we can say that the situation in the region is still fragile. The reason behind of the lack of mutual environment, mutual dialogue environment for many years.
Please wrap up your answer because we are running out of time.
I'll finish. And the diplomacy actually being these countries has historically been dominated by skepticism. So comparative history and politics shows us that such obstacles are usually overcome by establishing mutual trust. Mutual trade. So that's why regional formats are very important, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, with your permission, I will make a change in the course of this discussion. I will mix two questions and ask Dr. Abdaliani, Yelda, and Mr. Kiani to answer two questions at the same time, because we have like 10 minutes. And we have a lot of questions and good questions. So my question, my reformulated question is, what are the Turkish and, for Yelda, the Turkish perspective as to possibilities and challenges, and what kind of expectations do you have as to the future of the region? What should Turkey do? This is my question for Yelda. I am mixing two questions into one. And for Dr. Abdaliani and Mr. Kipiani, what are the Georgian perspectives as to the possibilities and challenges in the region? And what kind of expectations do you have as to the future of the region? What should Georgia do? So these are my questions for Yelda and Emil and Mr. Kipiani. So Emil, can we continue with you?
Sure. Thank you very much for these questions. I'll start with a bit pessimistic point of what Georgia really fears at the present time. And I think what the official Tbilisi and generally the public here and analysts are worried about is that whether the region is being gradually closed by Russia, and how this will be impacting Georgia's well, already historically quite long and tight relations with the collective West. And in the collective West here, I'm also including Turkey. I think that's the problem which well, politicians here also are arguing, well, thinking about, and generally the official Tbilisi is quite worried that if the situation around Ukraine sort of heats up further, and as the events in Kazakhstan also showed, there is a sort of a very concrete trend where you see how Russia is trying to build sort of a new vision on how it should be managing its various neighborhoods, whether it's Central Asia or South Caucasus or even wider Black Sea region. So in Georgia really fears that this tiny region could be gradually cut off from the West. Of course, I'm not saying about complete withdrawal of the West, but sort of diminishing of the Western influence, and that's what worries the official Tbilisi. And for that very reason, I think what makes really Georgia-Turkish relations more important is that South Caucasus and Black Sea, or eastern half of the Black Sea at least, are those geographic areas where the collective West and Turkey have near identical visions, near identical interests. And that's quite rare because of at times very complicated relations between Ankara and the US or European Union. But in this region, those actors, I mean Turkey and the West, they have very much similar ideas on how the future of these regions should be defined. And I think that makes Tbilisi-Ankara relations even more important for Tbilisi, because that's essentially where both Turkey and West really support East-West connectivity, territorial integrity of small countries, and sort of limiting the trends where Russia sort of tries to build a sort of a near exclusive vision in the region. So no one really wants it, whether it's in Ankara or in the West. And I think the first is a bit negative point. The second is quite positive in terms of Georgia-Turkey relations. And I think these two trends are major sort of highways, I would say, where the foreign policy of Georgia will be sort of driving through.
Thank you. And now, Yelda, what are your ideas?
Yeah. Thank you again. Well, it's very hard to, considering the dynamics in the region, I think it's very hard to answer this question, especially two questions together as rapidly as possible. But when we analyze the position of Turkey, considering the dynamics in the region, we see that Turkey is exercising a very the kind of multi-vector diplomacy and very proactive role in the region. And we can actually give many different examples when we analyze the kind of 6 months. We see that, for instance, there is an initiative between Turkey and Armenia regarding, I mean, the last week, actually, Turkey and Armenia talks kind of took place in Moscow, and parties agreed to continue the negotiations together, and we expect a kind of potential initiatives in the future for opening the Turkey-Armenian border. And the last month, as far as I remember correctly, Yerevan announced that it lifted the embargo on Turkish goods. And we also see that Turkey suggested 3+3 format to contribute to the stability in the region and for further cooperation. I know that our Georgian friends has some doubts about the format and the kind of structure of the format. However, I think that it's a very good signal in terms of reducing the tension in the region. It's kind of paving the ground for the diplomatic talks and the potential areas for cooperation in terms of energy issue, in terms of increasing the trade and increasing the commercial ties between countries in the region. We also see that President Erdogan announced that he will visit Ukraine to have a negotiator, to have a mediator role, to ease down the tension in the region between Ukraine and Russia. I think it also indicates a proactive role in the Turkish diplomacy regarding the dynamics in the region. And maybe most importantly, Turkey used every opportunity to underline its respect and its support, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine and Georgia. I think these are the main issues which underlines the Turkey's position and specifically for the relations between Georgia and Turkey, we see that the relations between Georgia and Turkey is remarkable in terms of mutual trust, in terms of the economic relations, and the sharing the similar values in terms of democracy, in terms of rule of law. Turkey is a main supporter of the post-Soviet transition process of the South Caucasus countries. So I see that Turkey is quite proactive, and considering the rather reluctance of the Western actors to solve the problems in the region, I think it gives a very important and strategic position to Turkey, coupled with its the historical and political ties in the region. And we see that Turkey will use every opportunity to prevent the potential tension which would erode the stability in the region and continue to support the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and Georgia. I think I need to underline again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Yazgan. And Mr. Kiani, we are eager to learn your ideas.
It's not very hard, frankly speaking, for me to respond to your question. And my response would be that, well, Georgia, like every other nation, has its own imperative. And that imperative is very, very straightforward: to ensure its own security in the first place, and to ensure favorable conditions for the sovereign identity development. And I'm stressing sovereign identity because it's no question about national identity of Georgia. That's the fact, which is well established for centuries. But as I've said, it's much easier to respond, but much difficult to do. To start with, of course, we well realize that that imperative is premised on ensuring national sustainability, security, resilience, and competitiveness. But if you ask me about a broader framework for implementing that imperative, I think that the basic principle should be that any decision by Tbilisi when conducting its foreign policy should be, in the first instance, be read, understood, well accepted, and shared by Georgian public. That's the key points. And I think that any foreign policy should run here strictly in compliance with that understanding and acceptability. Nevertheless, I'll try to expand and try to comprise my response in 2 or 3 minutes, with your permission. What are the pillars, still the fundamental pillars in the changing dynamics of the regional order? The key pillar, which is really existential for us to understand, about either an increase of the Western presence in the region or decrease. This is very fundamental. As you know, our foreign policy and our security is very much hinged on the solid and tangible and substantial Western presence in the region. So this is the first point. The second point, although we realized that the mainstream Georgian foreign policy should be maintained, but when giving my probably an idealistic response to your first question, I said that Georgian policy probably would be bound by, say, let me put it this way, a two-tier or two-frequency policies, which is about the foreign trajectory, and the second about the regional trajectory. And I think that so far Georgian policy has been more willingly or unwillingly ignorant about the regional landscape. From now on, we should be taking more into account the regional implications. And I very much welcome the relatively recent initiative by the Georgian Prime Minister, which is about Peaceful Neighborhood Initiative. This is really a very sort of, the interesting initiative, although it's very, it is at the very beginning stage of its development. But I think, it's really very healthy, countering any other initiatives in the region, because this initiative is based on the basic principles, respecting the basic principles of international law, order, and comity. And therefore, it should be well shared, accepted, and welcomed by all players in the region. The second point, although I said that the broader foreign policy, but still I think that, and various regional initiatives, the Peaceful Neighborhood Initiative in the first place, but I still think that in a foreseeable future, predominantly the politics in the South Caucasus would be conducted via bilateral relations, and that would be the key foundation of doing the politics and geopolitics in the region. And therefore, I'm getting to your closing question about us and Turkey. In the first instance, I should necessarily start with the potentials and hidden potential of increasing the Black Sea role in the greater Black Sea area. This is very important, where Turkey is bound to take a critical lead, and we're more than willing to follow it. This is very important. So I think it's in a very it falls on the natural interests of Turkey and Georgia to capitalize on the security factor of the Black Sea and the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. This is very important. The next point, my colleagues mentioned that Turkey is a staunch supporter of Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and I really most wholeheartedly thankful for all your efforts in this regard. And we should also have not to overlook the recent statements by Minister Çavuşoğlu about the sort of stronger voice of for Georgia and on behalf of Georgia becoming the member of NATO. But still, focusing on more narrowly on Turkey and Georgia, I think that it's not just a one-way street when we need Turkey's support, but I think it's also in the best interests of Turkey having to its north order stable, safe, resilient, and democratic Georgia as its partner. This is very important, and we all know what are the implications in that respect. So I think that in the broader perspective, Dr. Tuncel, when we speak about amorphous connotations of stability and peace, those have very specific and concrete meanings. And I think that Georgia and Turkey are very clear, natural, and organic addendums to that very broad agenda. So these are probably the sort of the quick points, and probably the very last points were mentioned on many occasions. BTC, South Caucasus pipeline, Baku-Tbilisi cars, those are very important. But I think that we should be looking for more to come on the pipeline, because identifying new functionality for a small nation like Georgia it's about being of use and being of sort of of practicable contribution. So I think that with Turkey we should discuss more in that regard, and I think that Azerbaijan is ready to join us in those discussions. So all in all, those are my last point. And the very last, I promise you, the very last, we all forgot about China, who is not selling in the region so far, and whose interposition definitely could cause a U-turn in the regional landscape. But this is still something I would not be saying on the horizon. But China is looking how Russia is taking care of the security matters. So I would not expect for, I don't know, for foreseeable future for China to intervene more robustly into the South Caucasus Pokumaya. So those are the closing remarks, and I thank you very much indeed for your very interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, this was, I think, a very good discussion, and I took a lot of notes myself to use in my analysis and op-eds. So now it is 5:36. We passed 6 minutes, but also we have some wonderful questions. If we have patience for, I don't know, like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever, I want to ask a question, because there are some questions and several of them are on the same topic. So I just want to, reformulate these questions and want to hear your ideas in 3-4 sentences, not more, because I know everyone may have some other things to do, but I want to ask this question. The questions are about actually BTE, BTK, BTC, this pipeline and railroad projects. So there is discussion about Zangezur corridor. How would it influence Georgia, the BTK railway and Georgia? How would the opening of the Turkish-Armenian state borders affect Georgia's economic interest or other interests? And how the Iranian project of Persian Gulf Black Sea corridor influence Georgia? So they are all related questions. They are all about this transport corridor, so on and so forth. I want to hear your ideas in very few sentences about those issues. Zangezur corridor, opening of the Turkish-Armenia border, the possibility of opening of the border. How would they affect Georgia? What do Georgia, the people in Tbilisi, think? I'm asking this to my Georgian colleagues and to my Turkish colleagues. They can also comment on that, but very short. Anyone can start. Whoever wants to start answer can answer.
A very brief response from my side. When we speak about opening new corridors, the modern world is about interdependency and interconnectivity. So there is nothing against which we in Tbilisi should or could have against any extra corridors. So this is one point. The second point, of course, if we speak about the competition or the potential competition among existing, the so-called Georgian corridors and the newly formed, to be formed corridors, we should not, we should necessarily take into account that it's not about the wishing to open, but it's about commercial feasibility, it's about security risks, it's about established reputation and transparency. I think that in all possible respect, with all my due respect to Zangezur and any others, Georgian transport corridors, they enjoy all those, not just potentials, but crystallized opportunities. So I think that we don't have much to fear about, but of course, we have to watch closer and engage ourselves whenever possible and welcome. That's it.
Thank you. This was a very clear, answer. Anyone else would like?
Yeah, I would like. Yeah, can I? Yeah. I think. Well, many people actually think that the new corridor might the corridor through the southernmost part of Armenia could very painfully impact Georgia. But I really believe that those two corridors, one through Georgia and one through Armenia, could be very much complementary to each other. That's one positive thing. Yet another thing is that I actually see the competition, if you might call it, between these two corridors very beneficial to Georgia, because that would drive the policy in Georgia by successive Georgian governments to actually put more money, more energy into the improvement of infrastructure to compete with other corridors if a corridor through Armenia really becomes a corridor which bites at the transit capacity of Georgia. So I think the competition actually might be more beneficial to Georgia, might make it more, might make it to develop a clearer policy on the development of infrastructure up and down the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. And Yelda and Tutku, would you like to say anything on this question, but very short?
Yeah, I totally agree with Mr. Avdaliani.
Yeah, actually,
we started the same time. Turgut Hocam, you
Yeah.
and me?
Yeah, let's start with Yelda, then give the last word to Tutku.
I totally agree with Mr. Avdaliani and Mr. Kiani. I think I think we need to consider that the interdependency and economic relations and expanding economic relations is still the key factor for maintaining or rebuilding, let's say, security in the region and the stability. So I don't think that it would be a kind of negative, factor for increasing the kind of peaceful cooperation between countries. On the contrary, I think it would be quite beneficial for all the partners, all the actors in the region. For the Turkish-Armenian border, some experts claim that it would, be harmful for Armenian market dynamics. However, I doubt that. I think that it would be a kind of very important opportunity for our Armenian friends and for Armenia just to benefit from the Turkish companies and the trade volume, potential of trade volume between Armenia and Turkey. So I also think that these are the very positive the developments that we can, build our kind of regional stability upon, hopefully.
Thank you. And finally, Tutku. Tutku, do you hear me? I guess we lost Tutku because she's frozen now. Yeah. All right. Then, because we don't have Tutku with us, she's frozen because of the internet connection problems. I like to finish this wonderful webinar. I think it was really wonderful. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you very much, dear Her Excellency Ambassador Yazgan and dear speakers. Mr. Kılıç, AVİM Director, please you close this session. We are finishing, and I want to finish with your words. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Well, thank you, Turgut. Not much to add to what has been said, but this has been a very valuable session. We have learned a lot. Again, my deep thanks and appreciation to Ambassador Fatma Ceren Yazgan and Mr. Viktor Kiani, Dr. Avdaliani, Yelda Hanım, Karada, and Tutku. I hope we shall continue with our meetings with Geocase in the future. This has been a very useful session. Thank you all for your participation, and I wish all participants healthy days ahead. Thank you.